Hello and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to rebuild a set of 10-2 axles. Basically all we're reusing from the old axles is the cases and the lockouts. So let's take a look and see what all we have here. A lot of these parts came from GPM Racing, so I'm going to go over them first. Here we have the steel rear shafts. For the front axle we're putting in the steel CVDs. To mount the links to and the shocks we have their link mounts in orange. Also in orange we have their diff covers, one for the front, one for the rear. Then from Axial I have a set of bushings here that will go into these knuckles between them and the C-hubs. I'm not sure the brand of these are. They were originally anodized red. We stripped anodization off and painted them with an orange paint that matches our wheels. In the middle of the axles, we'll have a set of Devil RC spools, ring gears, and pinions. Got these from Locked Up RC. And to make everything spin nice and smooth, we'll have Jim's bearings in the axles themselves. And these lockouts are aluminum. I'm not sure what brand they are either. They came with the axles. They were originally anodized red. Somebody stripped anodization off and painted them black. So we're just going to leave them black for now. And of course, like I said, my old 10-2 cases. These cases are used, but they've been cleaned up and now they're ready to go again. There's no cracks or breaks in them, so we're going to go ahead and use them for this application for now. Maybe in the future we'll replace them with a set of beef tubed axles. We'll just have to wait and see. And holding all this together, we are going to use some stainless steel hardware. I have it here in my handy dandy little case. This is from KNK Hardware. Check them out. They make the best stainless steel hardware sets on the planet. Okay, so I guess it's time to start assembling all this. Oh, one more thing I want to show you. Make sure you always have this. These right here I printed out off the internet from Axial's website. It's just the instructions on how to install the 10-2 axles. Where I'm putting these together from used parts, used cases originally, and didn't have like a lot of the bearings and stuff like that. I made notes in here as I ordered the parts. Like here you can see the list of bearing sizes I needed. I was originally going to order them all separate, but then I found Jim's bearings and went with his bearings instead. But just saying, get these. Even if you've installed and built axles before, it's nice to have these handy because you might need a reference for something. So maybe you need a screw size or something like that. And that's great because they do have the 1-to-1 size charts here to go by. Well, time to start putting these axles together. I'm going to go ahead and start with the front axle. Even though both axles are the same, I'm just calling this one the front axle because it'll be the one that ends up with the steering components on it. Got all my parts laid out here. Have some marine grease here that I'll be using to lube all the parts inside. Make sure you do grease the gears. I like marine grease. It's just simple tube from the auto parts store. Great stuff. Put in these baby food jar containers just to make it easier to handle. I'm going to follow the directions and go in the order that they say to go in. Luckily though, with these Devil RC spools and ring gears, I'm saved a step because they're already assembled. I do want to go ahead and just hit each one of these screws to make sure they are tight. Like I said before, I hope these have Loctite on them. Whenever I did the unpackaging of them, don't know if they do or not, but I'm going to assume they do. I know, I shouldn't assume, but here we go. First step calls for putting bearings on. The SCX-10s do not use sealed bearings around the ring gears. So, here we go. Those are installed. Next step is I have to put a bearing on the pinion gear. This right here is the bigger of the two bearings for these shafts. There we go. Use my finger to hold it in place while I put the bearing on the back side of it. Now if I pop the pinion gear out, the bearing should stay in. Yep, see? Which is good, because what I'm going to do next is get that pinion gear back out. I'm going to put just a little dab of grease on the back side of the pinion gear. The reason why I do this is it will keep water from making its way in around the bearings, hopefully. I'm going to take me my little stick here, put just a little dab of grease on it, and just a little bit around the back of the pinion. It doesn't take much for this, just a little bit. Okay, now I'm going to drop the pinion gear back into the axle case. There we go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and drop the ring gear in. I will be pulling the ring gear back out. I just want to make sure it fits right. Okay, it's in there, fits nice, spins nice and free. You can't really tell it here on the camera, but you want to go and look and make sure that the ring gear is not hitting your spool. That sometimes can be a problem if it's too far forward. Sometimes people put shims between the bearing and the ring and the pinion gear, so that can push it too far forward. This one feels like all the way back, and looks like all the way back out, is the best place for it to ride. May have to put a shim on the outside of it, between the drive shaft and the case, to hold it that far back, but that looks like the place to be. So now I'm going to pull this gear back out, and then put some lube down on the pinion gear first, and then just a little bit on the ring gear. I personally like to put this probably more lube than most do in here, but it's because I like to play in water. And this marine grease will help keep the water at bay. See, I have coated the pinion quite liberally. So now let's add just a little bit to the ring gear. When it comes to the ring gear, I like to put a pretty good sized dollop on about a third of it. Like that right there. And now I'm going to drop this into the axle itself. Okay, get lined up just right so it drops down in there. There we go. Now we're in place. See, spin the pinion gear. Ring gear spins nice and smooth still. So now it's time to put on the gear cover. Like I said before, for the gear covers, I'm using these ones from GPM. Let's go ahead. Let me wipe my fingers off real quick. Always keep a paper towel handy when working with grease, because you will get it all over you. I don't care how hard you try not to, you always get it all over you. So let's just slide this in place. Look at that. Fits perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and put the screws in. Once they're in place and you start screwing them in with your driver, go a little bit slow. That way you make sure you're not cross-threading them. Don't force them in. If you feel like you're forcing in, try wiggling the screw a little bit and get the thread in correctly. I'm not going to tighten it down all the way yet. I'm just going to basically loosely tighten each screw. Through the magic of high-speed video there, went through that pretty quick. So now that I got them in there, I'm going to tighten them up in a crisscross pattern. That way it'll help even out the load on the axle itself. Yeah, so that way it won't be no binding. You don't want to over tighten these too much because the plastic can flex, and you could strip out the aluminum. A lot less chance of, but the plastic ones you could strip out the diff cover. Okay, let's see if she still spins smooth. Oh yeah, nice and smooth. And you want to spin it a few times, this way it spreads the grease around inside the axle and across the ring gear. It's better to do it now than under load while in the truck. Yep, definitely got to have it back all the way, push it in. I can feel it when I push it in. It's hitting on the spool, so I probably will have to use a small washer to hold it back. Luckily the Devil RC ones did come with a washer, and probably just for that reason, to shim that pinion gear back. But that feels good. And as you spin it, you'll feel the grease get spread around and it gets smoother and smoother and smoother. Okay. First steps is finished. Let's move on to the next step. Now we're on to step 3 in the instructions. We're going to be putting on the C-hubs, the knuckles, drive shafts, and putting in the bearings for them. Okay, this right here, I'm going to do this part first. I'm going to start by putting the bearings into the end of the axle. But instead of just dropping the bearings in, I like to put just a little bit of grease down the hole, because like I said before, I like to run in water, and this grease acts as a barrier. So first, get a little dab of that. And just kind of work it into there. Now that I have the grease in the hole, I'm going to go ahead and push in the bearing, and then I'll clean off any grease that squirts out of the hole. Remember I said keep a paper towel handy, because grease is messy. And now I will do the same thing to the other side. You do not have to do this. Like I said, it's just what I do. Got a little bit too much there. So just take my applicator, clean out the excess, and now push another bearing in. Once again, wipe off the excess. The excess will come out and make a mess. There we go. Both those are done. Now it's time I can put my C-hubs on. Now I want to show you something again. This is where having these instructions comes in handy. Because see, it shows you the correct degrees to cock them in. You know, 0 to 10 back, not forward. Also, if you are planning on running a 3-link, which I am not though, but still, the instructions do show you which side gets the panhard mount. And also it's important because these are right and left specific. Slide this one on. There we go. I'm going to compare it to the picture we have over there. Yep. You can see here in the picture, it shows the line coming up there in front of the upper link mount. The angle. And right there, you see she comes up in front of the upper link mount. So now I have to put the one on the other side. And important to get it lined up the same way. Make sure that your holes are on the bottom. There we go. Looks like the splits are lined up. So I'll go ahead and shove her on. And have it in the right place. Okay, time to go on to the next step. Remember how I said grease will get everywhere? Look at that, got grease in the hole. I'm not even sure how that happened. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that out real quick, then move on to the next step. Now for the next step, we're going to take this big bearing here and put it into the back of the hub. Get it lined up there. I didn't push it in yet because I'm going to put the CVD in it and use it to wiggle it into the hub. like so. Now we have that one all the way in. We're going to go ahead and take the little one and put it over the outside and push it into the hub from there. Where these have been painted, the tolerance is a little bit tighter, but that's okay. Just gotta wiggle it down in there. You can pull this out and come from the other side and push it on in if need be. There we go. Both bearings are in. The CVD will drop through from the front, like so. There we go. We are good to go on this side. Now just to do the same thing to the other side. Now that I have both these assembled, it's time to slide these shafts into the axle. But first, I want to take the extra spool I have, the one that's going to go in the rear end, and see how well these CVDs slide into it. Sometimes with aftermarket parts, they can be a bit snug getting them fit together. I know, for example, that the locked up spools have problems with their own OTV CVDs sliding in. You have to grind them down just a little bit to get them to slide in. So I'm going to see how these are. Oh, those are very snug, just a little bit. Just a little bit needs knocked off of them. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to knock just a little bit off of these. Take my grinder and just make them shine. So let me go do that and I'll be right back. There we go. I got one shaft fully ground down. Now I need to do the other one. As you can see now, it will slide into the locker. And it will wiggle back out. So I tried this in a stock locker, and this fit fine into the stock one. Just these aftermarket one is a little bit tighter than your stock locker. Oh, I'll have to grind off this other one. Now we're ready to put our CVDs into the spool that's inside this axle here. I know in the instructions it shows you putting them in with the hubs. I like to do it without them, without the knuckles. So I'm going to put it in just first, and then I'll put the knuckle on and bolt it down. For these right here though, I like to put just a little bit of grease on them. The reason being is it helps them slide into the locker easier and move back and forwards if need be. And also, since this is now bare metal, it'll help prevent rusting if water does happen to make its way in. Just a little bit. You don't need much. It's just enough to slide into the locker. So let's go ahead and put it through the bearing there. Slide it through the axle tube. Now comes the fun part of getting it lined up with that locker in there. There we go. That one's in place. Now do the same thing to the other one. Start with a light coating of grease. Oh, that one's being a little stubborn. There we go. Now it is in place. Now you may have noticed I haven't tightened these down yet. Normally Axial calls for a 3 by 15 millimeter screw to go through there, and through the normal stock C-hubs. Mine themselves are a little bit different. They use a nut whenever you clamp them down, so I'm using a 3 by 16 millimeter stainless steel screw from KNK. And I'll be using a stainless steel lock nut on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down real quick. This is another case of where you want things tight, but don't over torque it. Especially with using metal ends, you could bust the plastic tube. Now it is time to put the knuckles on. Normally the SCX-102 knuckles use a screw that has a big fat shoulder on it that goes down through and holds it into the C-hub. These are aftermarket units and does not use that same mounting method. Instead, they use these little bushings, the same as what's in a 10-1 axle. The AX30450 fit the bill perfectly, so I'm going to put them into these C-hubs and hubs and get them both assembled. And here we have the axle completely assembled. We have the knuckles installed, CVDs in. Now all we got to do is we'll add the shock mounts to the front of the axle. Real quick thing I want to mention here is once I put this in the truck, I will hit these joints right here with a spray of Mousse Slick. It's I don't know if you're familiar with Mousse Slick or not, it's from Cal RC. It's a dry lubricant. It'll keep those parts lubricated and moving freely and keep them from rusting if they're out in moisture and mud, muck, water, whatever. And look at that, that axle is looking good. Okay, next thing up, let's go ahead and move on to the next step in the instructions, which I believe is installing the shock mounts. Let's flip the page here and see. Yep, installing the shock mounts. Well, I have one shock and link mount on. The camera slightly messed up and I missed putting that one on, but that's okay. I still have another one to go. So real quick so you can see how this goes on. Just like the stalkers. I am not sure though in the end if I need this part pointing up or down, because this is not going on a 10.2. I'm putting it into my 10.1. So I'm not sure which way they'll fit the best in that situation. But for right now, this is how I'm putting them on, because doing it this way, it seems that this right here lines up the best with how far away from the center line of the axle the stock 10.1 mounts are. So let me go ahead and get the other one on. It just snaps into the back of the axle like so, and then just put the short screws through. Now normally on a 10.2, the servo is mounted up in the chassis. On my 10.1, I have it mounted on the axle. I'm not sure yet if I want to move it to the chassis, but I think more than likely I'm going to keep it on the axle. Right now I'm looking at a set of servo mounts for the 10.2 axles that moves the servo to the axle, made by BPC. So you'll get to see those in a future video if that's what I go with. And they mount right here where the stock 10.2 links go. These bolts I'm putting in right now is what will hold that servo mount on. But that's in a little bit farther down the future, so we'll see how things go. There we go, all mounted up. Now all that's left to do is to build a rear axle. I'm not going to go and talk through each individual step on it because it's pretty much all just the same. The only thing I will mention is whenever something is different. Before I start on the rear axle, if you remember right, on the front axle, I had to grind down the shafts to fit this spool. It's the same with these rear shafts. I had to grind them down to fit into the slots in the middle of this spool. And just to point out something here, it's the spool's problem. Like this spool right here is not the same on each end. This end is actually tighter than this end. That's why this one has a piece of tape on it, so I know which one is ground down for which side. And I go to install them into the case itself. So now all I gotta do is put the bearings on, put them in the axle case, throw some grease on it, and be ready to move on to the next step. This axle shouldn't take as long since there's no moving parts on the end out here. Now we're at the step where we'll put the bearings on the rear axle shafts. Go ahead and get those slid on real quick. And before the lockouts go on, I want to take this area right here. I'm going to put some grease up against the back of this bearing because, like I said, this will help keep water out of the axle, and this is a big open area that water would like to set in. Once again, I'm just using marine grease. You can pick it up at your local auto parts store, big box store, supermarket. Pretty much anywhere that sells grease will sell marine grease. That may seem like a lot of grease, but it'll help keep water out of your axle. So now we just go and slide the lockout on. Now put the bolts through it and then move on and do the other side just the same. And here we have the rear axle. Not quite as flashy as the front axle because of these black lockouts here, but overall still nice and shiny and looks very, very good. Got the orange GPM diff cover visible, as well as the orange link mounts on the back, also from GPM. You can see the double RC pinion gear sticking out there. And all the stainless hardware is from KNK. And now we have a pair of finished axles that will find their way under Ugly Duckling in a future video. They look very, very nice. They're nice and pretty without breaking the bank and should hold up very, very well. Using a host of GPM parts, as well as hardware from KNK Racing, Devil RC spools and pinions and ring gears, as well as Jim's bearings throughout. So thank you for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the video where these get installed in my 10-1, the truck known as Ugly Duckling. And also follow us on Instagram. The link that's down below. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to ask. You can hit us up at any of the links down below. I'll do my best to answer your questions you may have. Also, be sure to like this video. And until next time, happy RCing.